Black Doctors. Hello and welcome back to the Black Doctors podcast. I am Dr. Stephen Bradley, your host, critical care anesthesiologist, biomedical ethicist by training, and we're here every Monday to provide some inspiring content wherever you are in your journey. This month of June, we're celebrating 4 years on the air. Last week, I went through our origin story, the Black Doctors podcast, how I decided to start the show. I provided a lot of the metrics and things that we've accomplished over the last 4 years. Definitely go out and check that episode. Listen if you haven't already. I try to make that helpful for people that may be interested in starting a podcast and provide some relevant, actionable information if that's something you might be interested in. This week, I wanted to start off with some reviews. We just hit 100 total reviews on Apple Podcast, huge milestone. I think most of them are 5-star, which is awesome. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time to go and write a review for the show. It really helps us to grow. It helps us to rank on the Apple Podcast list. Every couple weeks, we'll break like the top 200 list for a couple of days, and that's pretty cool. And then I pop on and off the top 100, top 10 listings, even for countries like Nigeria and Sweden, randomly, sometimes Russia, these random countries. It's kind of fun to see who pops up on the podcast rankings. Some of the reviews we received, this one says, fantastic topics to host and guest. I thank you. Listen to and from work, currently a radiology resident. Plan to recommend to pre-meds and med students too. Appreciate all the hard work put into this. Thank you, Dr. Medrano, for that review. Another review from Aklum Nani. This podcast is great and continues to excel. Listening to episodes from anxiety to how to excel in residency to how SNMA is the greatest is all just amazing. Somehow, even after a fellowship, Dr. Bradley continues to serve and give us a home, an audio home, where all of our concerns and joys may live, even if they are in Star Wars scrubs. I think I had a rant about the Figs Star Wars scrub collection a couple episodes back. And one more review. It says, my favorite podcast ever. Oh my gosh, I'm flattered. Been listening to the Black Doctors podcast a few years now, from the time I was a post-bac student prepping for the MCAT. Now I'm in medical school. I must say the information shared in the podcast has positively influenced my medical journey. I've taken advice from and been inspired by many of the stories told. Plus, I always end each episode in a good mood. I can always expect a good laugh from listening. I'm not always trying to be funny. Hopefully we're laughing together sometimes. But it says I can always expect a good laugh from listening. Highly recommend anyone interested in a career in medicine or healthcare in general to take a listen. So thank you all if you took the time to write a review. Really appreciate it. It really helps provide some motivation for the show to grow. Other things, you may have noticed the ad from TrueLearn. They're sponsoring the show once again and helping offset some of the costs. It does cost some money to purchase and invest in the equipment. A lot of these programs that you used to just buy one time, or back in the day you could download for free from Napster or whatever program, LimeWire, whatever you're using. Now they've made it so you buy the program and then there's a recurring subscription, even though you quote unquote own it. Anyways, the team at TrueLearn, they have a ton of test prep material. You should check it out. There's a discount. Go to the show notes. You can have a code to get a discount on their products, and we definitely appreciate them partnering with us. This week, I'm going to talk about some things I think people can find relevant and useful. We are on the cusp of starting a new academic year in medicine, so this year kind of snuck up on me. I remember the match day, because there's some residents where I work, and it's okay, it's match day, that's cool. And then next thing I know, people are posting graduation photos. I'm like, oh my God, graduation from medical school is already here. So congratulations to all of the new graduates from medical school. Congratulations to all the folks that are finishing residency programs. Such huge, huge milestones. Definitely take some time to relax, congratulate yourself, savor the moment that you've worked so hard to attain. Wherever you are in your journey, maybe you're a pre-medical student that just got accepted to medical school. Maybe you're a medical student that just finished and is about to start residency. Maybe you're just finishing up residency now. I personally spent a lot of time in the past, and I use that to kind of motivate myself further into the future. And there's days, in the middle of intern year, I would oftentimes just take it 30 days at a time, and I'd be able to stop and look back at where I was at the beginning of that 1 month rotation or 1 month period, and then realize that, okay, hey, I made another 30 days on internal medicine wards. Thank God. The gens, if you know anything about University of Chicago, the gens are awful. And I use the past to kind of motivate myself to spring forward, but take little mental snapshots. I know there's a lot of camera phones and videos, so you can definitely memorialize these moments, but you deserve it. You've worked so hard to get to where you are. Congratulations. This week, I'm going to provide some of my tips or advice for how to navigate intern year or how to navigate these kind of new beginnings. I'll speak mostly for folks that are just starting. So you just finished medical school, you're an intern now, but also a little bit to those residents and attendings, who are working with interns now. So 10 tips to successfully navigate intern year in no particular order. Take it with a grain of salt. Some of these worked for me. I'm a little different. I think we're all a little different. Punctuality and gratitude. This actually came from a Google search. I'm not a very punctual person. I try to be. Unfortunately, I have a career that I have to be at the hospital super early. And most mornings I wake up and I'm just miserable because I don't really wake up until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. But you know what? I've been doing this for 6 or 8 years now and still don't love it, but it's manageable. So maybe that's some inspiration to you if you're not a morning person, but you, for better or worse, chose a career where you have to get up early in the morning. But do try to be punctual. In the beginning, build a lot of time for mistakes. If you hit all the red lights, if you don't know where to park. One of the most helpful things that I found when I was actually late to intern year orientation. I don't know how helpful these 10 pieces of advice are going to be if I'm completely transparent. I was late to my intern year orientation because we had 2 orientations, one at the main hospital and one at this other hospital that we rotated at. But the hospital up North Shore, had like multiple campuses. It was like the North Shore Health System, but they had different campuses in like Skokie and Evanston, all these little cities in Illinois that I didn't know I didn't know where they were. So I definitely rolled up to the wrong hospital, parked in visitor parking, went in and couldn't find anything. I had to go back through the emails and was like, oh shoot, I'm like 20 minutes down the road. So then I had to get in the car and book it to the next location. So don't do that. Double and triple check the locations, and you can use Google Map and figure out where you need to go. After you're done with that orientation, maybe you want to run off to happy hour, you want to go get home or whatever. Maybe take a little bit extra time if you're at a new facility to just walk around the campus or the facility and really get a lay of the land, understand how to get from one part of the hospital to the other, where you're going to be rotating, how to get to the operating rooms. And that can really help alleviate a lot of the anxiety. Figure out the parking situation, and you'll be able to time and see how much time do you actually need to get from your house to where you need to be in the morning. That's super important because you do need to be at work on time, especially if you're, a shift. If you're doing 12s and the people are waiting to come off shift and they can't sign out until you get there. That was our situation. I mean, I was pretty much on time within 5 or 8 minutes to get my co-interns out. There was one of my co-interns, she was regularly late, 20, 30 minutes late. And I don't really know what happened to her. I don't think she got in any trouble. I would have gotten in trouble if I was like that. But she had a little bit of privilege and did not get in trouble for that. But don't let that be you. Come to work on time. Be grateful for the opportunity to treat people. And you actually get paid now. So I was super happy because I know you don't get paid much as an intern or whatever, but that was the most money that I'd ever made, making $60,000 or $70,000 a year. It's actually pretty darn good compared to most people in America. I know you're working twice the hours, but I was just so happy to start making a paycheck. I'd worked, probably 4 or 5 different jobs. I worked at Subway and I did construction work, and all things considered, for me, intern years, at least I got to work in air conditioning, and, you got to wear the white coat. And it was like kind of the realization of all the things that I dreamed about when I first started down that pathway to medicine. So it's really your dreams coming to fruition. And I see it all the time now in social media. People are so excited on match day. They're ecstatic. You've matched to, your number one choice or whatever the case. You match into the specialty that you wanted. And then graduation is a high, and starting intern year is a high. And invariably by like 3, 4, 5 months in, you hit that wall and you're just exhausted. So that's why I say savor the moment now, and then use that as motivation this fall, because you're going to be tired and burnt out, and you're like, man, why did I do this? You know why you did it, because you wanted to become a physician. You've done it. You've got the long white coat, and you're out there doing the dang thing. So use that as motivation to push forward. So I was happy, I was making some money. I had bills to pay and whatever, but be on time, be grateful for this opportunity. You have people putting their faith and trust in you and your skill set and your knowledge, and that's not something to be taken lightly. The next thing I would recommend is knowing how and having a mechanism to go out and complete your assigned task. So I'm also not really good at this, but one of my co-residents, Jen, was like the most efficient person ever. And she had a system, because in anesthesia, we would have a list of patients that we needed to pre-op. If they were inpatient, we had to go see them and write our notes and whatnot. And she always had a system to where she would pre-op these patients like on downtime in between cases, and then she would be out the door as soon as she was relieved. Whereas me, I'd just be messing around because I'm pretty social at work, and I'm hanging out, gossiping, probably sharing some tea. And then it's like, okay, Bradley, you're relieved for the day. And now I have to look at this list of patients I need to go pre-op, and then I would start pre-oping my patients. So don't do that. Know how to go about completing your tasks so that when you're relieved, you can just get up out of there. So keep your head down, get the work assigned to you done before you go home. I rarely ever take work home. Even in residency, I'd rather just sit at the hospital and do the work and then go home and not think about it at all. Every now and then, 'cause in anesthesia, we had to call and pre-op with our attendings. So sometimes I would have to, go home and make that phone call and pre-op. But I personally like to avoid taking work home. Some people prefer taking work home so you can sit on your couch and write your notes or whatever works for you, but have a system in place. And it may take you a couple weeks to develop a system. This is where your senior residents can come into play and ask them, hey, what works for you? What's the time frame within which I need to have X, Y, and Z done? And that can help you make a plan going forward. Doing exactly what you're instructed to do in the expected time translates into people recognizing that you are reliable. They can trust you to get your notes done, to get orders in on time. One of the biggest things to learn is when you have that list of patients, the checkbox system. You've probably done it as a third year or fourth year medical student, but maybe you haven't rotated, or maybe you probably haven't done much work in the last couple of months as a fourth year medical student. And going back to the basics, taking that checkbox and writing down everything that needs to be done, because your memory, you can only memorize and remember so many things. It's going to fade, and you want to make sure you're reliable and taking care of business every day. Managing perception. So perception's everything. This often seems unfair, especially being Black or underrepresented in medicine. But no matter how smart, efficient, compassionate you are, there's an image that you're going to maintain. My mommy always told me, it's a running joke with my wife and I, because I quote my mom a lot. I don't quote my mom a lot, but I think when we were first dating, I quoted my mom once or twice. And so my wife would be like, my mommy said, anyways, my mother always said that you only have one time to make a first impression. And it probably wasn't my mother that she didn't come up with that quote, but it's true. You have one time to make a first impression. So for the love of God, make a good first impression. Bust your butt. And when you're working with that new attending, you gotta work hard and at least put on appearances that you're really on top of it and you have everything together. When you're in your core specialty, know that all those attendings are talking to each other. There is even still some cross chatter when you're rotating off service as well, especially if you're off service within the same specialty. So all these attendings are colleagues, these residents are colleagues, and people talk, but you need to be aware of the vibes you're putting out. Are you putting out the vibes of you're a hard worker, you'll stay late, you'll get the job done, or are you the person that's going to get up out of there as soon as you can? Now, this is a personal choice because if you're not required, you're not required to stay late. Your shift is done. You should be able to sign out and leave immediately. But there is the optics of, I'm a team player, I'm going to stick around and help other people. And I say play that to your advantage. I spend a lot of time being that team player because there's a lot of social capital. I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the best test taker. But my reputation, as far as I know, was Bradley will work. He will get the job done. There's so many times I would be on call and I would just kind of bop around the hospital and see what was going on. If you walk through the ICU, there's probably somebody that's about to get intubated or that's coding. And I always thought it's better to be a bystander and watch what's going on and see what goes down than for the first time that I'm in that situation for it's all new to me. It's like, no, the stakes are low. I watched them do X, Y, and Z, and it can help prepare you if you've seen other things or been exposed to stuff. I would go to different, I wasn't on cardiac yet, but I'd poke my head into the cardiac room, watch them induce, and kind of give myself a step up. And the optics are, hey, this dude's around, we'll help him. Hey, you want to put this A-line in, the central line, float the PA catheter. They get you some social capital, and that can come in handy later on. If things don't go so well, you don't get a good score on an intern exam, plug for TrueLearn, use their test prep material. But people will go out of their way to help you if they know that you will put the work in and you're not just going to bounce as soon as you can. The investment has to kind of go both ways. But it's well within your right to just leave when your work is done. The fourth thing I'd say is optimism. So you should be optimistic. Again, you're making money. Finally, you're a doctor. You're getting paid to be a doctor. Be optimistic. You're in a field that so many people, think about all the folks that applied that are on Student Doctor Network. You fought so hard. You worked so hard to get to where you are. You get to be closely involved with people at their most vulnerable moments of their lives. You're working in a cohort of people that are like you in terms of, you guys all worked hard to get where you're at. I honestly felt like, being at University of Chicago, I felt like I was at like the Charles Xavier School of the Gifted. Like the school, the facilities are beautiful, kind of like Harry Potter land, but you're surrounded by such excellence. And as an intern, I'm looking up to my senior residents and the attendings, and they're all so good. And I was just always happy. Well, I wasn't always happy to go to work, but I was pretty optimistic. I'm like, this is pretty cool. There's worse places to be. There's worse places to work. And I was blessed to have like really good people, and not every program is going to have those same people. Some programs are quite malignant. Sorry if you were in that program. Reach out. We can talk if you need to talk. Next, I would say know your strengths and weaknesses. If being late is a weakness for you, plan to get up early to go to work. For me to make it to work on time, there's things I don't do. I always shower in the morning before work. I don't eat breakfast because I literally do not have time to make breakfast. I don't pack a lunch because I will never have time to pack a lunch. The best thing I can do is, hit the Nespresso and make a cup of coffee. You probably already have a place to live, but, living closer to the hospital doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be on time. You could live 15 minutes down the street and still be late. I'm proof of that. Sometimes I like a decent sized commute, so I can listen to my podcast and literally just like get ready to work. I've got to wake up again. Like I don't really wake up until like 10 or 11 o'clock. But know your strengths and weaknesses. Know, if you're bad at documentation, set up a plan to get better at it. Talk to your colleagues, to your senior residents. If it's a knowledge gap, realize that every intern has a knowledge gap. And you just have to read more. My best tip for that is the Medscape app. You can download it to your phone. It's free. I think you may need a Medscape account, which is free. And for pathologies, it's like up to date, but not as verbose. Like up to date, you could read for forever. It's too much for me personally. But Medscape is everything you need. It's like a combination of up to date and Hippocrates. It's just the right amount of information. Has drug dosage and some other good stuff in there. And you can quickly, you have a new admission you're going to go see in the ED. You can look up their symptoms or chief complaints, and you have your little working diagnosis. You can go to the Medscape app and pull out 5 or 6 working diagnosis, and then you can have that jotted down, and that's going to really help strengthen your knowledge gap and makes you look really good, sets those optics that you are proactive and maybe you know a lot more than you actually do because you looked up an app. But over time, you're going to learn by doing this. Know your strengths, know how you're perceived as well. I mean, it goes back to optics. If you're too sure of yourself, especially being a minority, I've found that people are quick to humble you. If you're hitting on all cylinders, you're a little cocky with it because you know your stuff. You've got to be perfect because people are just waiting for you to fail so they can point their finger and say, I told you we got him. He's not as good as he thinks he is. You can also be kind of humble and ask for help because people love like to help an underdog and they love to be like the savior and be like, he was so, inconfident in himself and didn't know, and we helped him, and look at him now, he's fantastic. So that's one of the angles that I may have played a time or two in my life. Humility and learning. Remember that nobody in the room knows everything. Nobody expects you to know everything either. Be willing to be humble and say you don't know what you don't know. That's a big problem in the field, is people that don't know what they don't know and then just continue to act like they do know, and then they really screw things up. But use this as motivation. Find the right answer in a book or through a senior or attending. And even when you're talking to these seniors and attendings, take all that with a grain of salt. Sometimes people just be talking. Sometimes they're giving you information that's outdated, that's 8 or 10 years old, that we really don't do anymore. Along the same lines, I think you'll find as an intern, or you go to a different hospital system, there's so many things that are just different in the system, from the standard broad spectrum antibiotic coverage. It's different from hospital to hospital. The names of medications, like I hadn't heard of Robaxin until I started at my naval hospital. So 4 years of residency, we didn't call it, we had Flexeril. We didn't call it Robaxin. We didn't have Roxicodone. We had Oxycodone. And my new hospital, we use Fragmin for DVT prophylaxis, which I hadn't heard of before I got here, really. So a lot of the medicine that you learn, it's very situational and institution-based. There's some differences that you'll have to catch up and learn the nuances. So be humble. You're going to continue to learn. Try not to challenge people. People do not like to be challenged. So like your senior residents, your attendings, even if you think they're saying something wrong, my personal advice is you don't call them out, and especially not in public, because they're going to get really defensive and it turns into a bit of a hostile environment. But you can politely kind of ask your question from a sense of like, I want clarification on this, or, what reference can I use? Try not to challenge people or put them on the spot, because they will probably kind of lash back, and it may not be the best learning environment, I guess is one way to put it. Embrace clinical learning. Kind of touched on this already. Usually interns you have the most basic kind of book and clinical knowledge, but you're there as an intern to get that clinical piece. You have the book and basic science knowledge, but you need a clinical side. This is expected, and you're going to pick up that clinical part through just volume and exposure. A lot of intern years being able to go to the door of a room, look at the patient and say they're sick or they're not sick. You'll see your senior residents, your attendings, we will use kind of a shorthand talk in medicine. We'll say to each other, blood pressure's a little soft, or patient sick or not sick. And we know kind of what that means because I'm talking to another attending, or I'm talking to a senior resident, or the senior residents are talking to each other. But as an intern, try to be very specific in your language. Don't use this jargon or short term, because from an intern saying blood pressures are soft or patient's not sick, nobody really knows what that means coming from you. No offense. It takes a while. It takes a couple of years to develop that clinical sense. And my personal advice is, it's not that blood pressure is soft. It's, the systolic blood pressure, it's 90 over 60 systolic. Or you can say, it's 90s to 100 systolic, something like that. But the numbers will be crystal clear for whoever you're speaking with, and they won't have to ask follow-up questions. Even, the last couple of weeks, I had a surgery resident tell me somebody's blood pressure was soft, and the patient came to the ICU tachycardia, heart rate was high. And I was like, well, how high? I was like, 105. Okay. Well, people really quickly lose that clinical piece of that very specific language. And as an intern or even as a resident, like maintaining that very specific verbiage can save so much time, and it looks really good and really professional. I get through a lot of stuff in life by kind of pretending like the movies that I've seen. So I was in the Navy. It was Master and Commander, The Far Side of the Sea, like with Russell Crowe. So I was really professional, and like, yes, sir, no, sir. And when I'm in the hospital, like in medicine, I'm pretending to be from whatever medicine drama you've seen, and speaking very specifically like the doctor, quote unquote, I've seen on TV. For anesthesia oral boards, I pretended I was a lawyer. I was in court, because everything you say, it could be held against you in an oral board setting. Anyways, I say all that to say, try to be very specific when you speak. Effective communication, that was the next point. Effective communication, you want to develop these good communication skills, whether it's discussing a patient case with your attending, coordinating care with nurses, or providing updates to patients' families. You want clear and effective communication is key. One of the most bothersome things to me is when we use medical jargon talking to patients' families. Even the things that we write, like they should be on like a 5th or a 6th grade reading level, like freaking basic. And I see so often people from all spectrums using words that patients don't understand and the family members don't understand. Well, when you're having a conversation with really smart people and they say things that you don't understand, like how often are you like, wait a minute, I don't understand what you're talking about. Most people don't do that because we don't like to feel inferior. We don't like to feel like we don't know what's going on. And most patients and their family members are not going to stop and ask for clarification. It's our job to do that up front. So I try to explain things in the most basic of ways. I'm trying to think of some examples, but, arterial line is, it's an IV that goes into the artery instead of the vein. Or a central line is a big IV that goes into one of the large blood vessels in your neck. Speaking that simply is essential for patients to understand, especially when our time is valuable, their time is valuable, but we've got multiple patients to see. You got to be running around. You're attending, and seniors expect you to be at certain places at certain times. So you want to be very clear in your communication. I went on already about communicating between different team members, but communication with patients is incredibly important. Asking questions, do you understand? Do you really understand? It looks like you might have a question. You kind of need to make sure that these concepts aren't getting lost. Number 9 would be time management. So prioritize your task and manage your time efficiently. Use tools like the to-do list I mentioned earlier, or task management apps to keep track of your responsibilities and deadlines. I've actually been using the to-do list in my phone for a lot. Like the last 6 months, it's really gotten me through a lot of stuff because out of sight, out of mind. I am all over the place. I procrastinate. And I'm just running and gunning. I make stuff up. I live life, a quarter mile at a time. So I've been able to use that to-do list and have a running to-do list of things that I need to get done. I can scratch off a lot. This past weekend, I gave a lecture at the Florida Society of Anesthesiologists on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yeah, a DEI lecture in the state of Florida. I think it went okay, but finally I can get that off my to-do list. Then I have a bunch of papers I need to write for Adam Milam, Dr. Milam out of Mayo Clinic. He has been doing a lot of research with him, I guess. But that checklist is essential for me to get this stuff done. So prioritize your task, manage your time efficiently, whether it's picking up groceries on your way home from the hospital, what you do on the weekends, how you study for exams. I highly recommend taking step 3 as early as possible because studying for step 3 will also help you as an intern. You want to study and knock that out, but it's going to give you that knowledge breadth again as an intern that you can handle all these patients that you're managing now. So it's kind of again, for me, it was very efficient to just knock that out. And then you can forget all the stuff that's not relevant to your, not all the stuff, but a lot of the stuff that's not relevant to your field. You can kind of not keep that as fresh in your mind. Finally, not most importantly, I hate when people say most importantly because important things are different to different people. But self-care, you got to take care of yourself. Intern year can be physically and emotionally demanding. Ensure you get enough sleep. You got to eat well. You got to exercise. I didn't get enough sleep as an intern. I didn't really eat that well, and I really didn't exercise. I think I turned out just fine. A little jaded, a little crotchety, but that was probably me baseline before intern year. Take time to relax and recharge. Yeah, I did that a fair amount. Your well-being is crucial for providing the best care to your patients. That's all well and good. I think we all have to keep track of that. There's days and times in my life where I can look back as an intern and say, this wasn't the healthiest. And planning your vacation time is essential. Knowing what holidays you're going to be working so you can just grind it out. You want to definitely space a vacation time out. Sorry to you surgery people. Sometimes have to take 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever at the same time. That's horrible. But try to space that vacation time out, and then it gives you something to work towards. It's kind of a carrot or a light at the end of the tunnel. Boom, you get your vacation, then you can recharge and then hit the ground hard. I learned from the surgery people, and we were doing this, back at Howard in medical school, the understanding that your 24-hour call was going to suck on surgery, and it didn't matter if you slept 8 hours the night before or 2 hours the night before. This probably isn't the best advice, but it's what I did, and it's probably going to suck, 24 hours, whether you're fully rested or not. And so there were times that, if the group's going out for St. Patrick's Day, watching the river get dyed, and you're on call the next day, maybe you go out and rage, and then you get 1 or 2 hours of sleep. Then you show up to work and just grind it out. Yeah, I only did it once or twice. Yeah, once was match day, celebrate with some friends, and then by the time I got in, I literally just went home, showered, went to the hospital, because I got to the hospital 4 a.m, and I was on call in the ICU, so I just crashed out in the call room for 2 hours, and then woke up with the sign out, so I was already there, So sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You got to, these once-in-a-lifetime experiences, man, you got to make it work. I went to a concert, one of the best concerts. I said it about most concerts I went to. It was a phenomenal concert, Robert Glasper and Snarky Puppy. And they were in Michigan somewhere. And I was in pain clinic, but I didn't get out till late. And I was like, do I drive or whatever? So I ended up flying from Chicago to, I think, Detroit. Then I rented a car. Then I drove an hour and made it to this concert, and then flew out the next day and made it right back to work. But it was worth it. These are the best stories. You can tell them later on. Back in my days, this is the crazy stuff that I had to do to maintain my work-life balance. And, you get to do all the stuff you get to You have to work hard, but you've got to cram in some of the other stuff and just make it do what it do. But if you need sleep, sleep. Yoga, if you want some wellness, and my hand pans back there, every Monday I'm putting out a 90-second clip of just sound bath therapy. I've really been getting into that recently as part of self-care, where you can just have some chill music, some ambient tones to just vibe out and relax. So, hey, check out my Instagram, Stephen Bradley MD, for your Monday mindfulness session. I don't know that it'll make up for raging and going to work on 2 hours of sleep, but it's worth a shot. And then I should, the next month, start putting out some longer form sound baths. Sound baths are pretty awesome. I have my singing bowls in the back there. Got to get them unpacked and then figure out how to make some sound baths I can post on YouTube. So stay tuned. Got a lot of stuff coming. That's pretty much it for today's episode. I kind of rambled through 10 different pieces of advice that I think are useful. It ended up being mostly geared towards interns and folks that are starting. Although, if you're a medical student or even senior resident, maybe you'll find it helpful. Always open to suggestions. If there's any topics you want to hear covered on the show, would love to hear from you. You can slide in the DMs at the Black Doctors Podcast on Instagram, or at Stephen Bradley MD on Instagram. That's my Instagram. I don't post so much medicine stuff there. I might occasionally, but now it's mostly my music, my lo-fi, and my ambient sound bath music. But that's where you can reach me, or you can send an email at stephenbradleymd@gmail.com. That's my email address. But would love to hear feedback from you. If you guys want anybody is like, hey, you need to interview this person, send them over. Would love to get them on the show. Also looking for additional sponsorships. If you know anybody or you want to highlight your business, your side hustle, whatever it is, let us know. And all that stuff just helps fund the show and eventually, hopefully, get some more giveaways and prizes. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Black Doctors Podcast. Every Monday, we're here because representation matters.